Listen, said John before I could answer. If the Bureau is going to invest time, money, and resources in George Rowe, they're going to want their investment protected. Right now, it's just you, me, and Detective Duffy in the inner circle. You don't want it getting much wider than that, okay? Because the wider that circle gets, the more dangerous it gets for you. Doesn't take much to compromise operational security. Man, get a few drinks in him, talks to the wrong person, he shrugged. Believe me, it's happened before. Now, I can't stop you from talking to this friend of yours. That's your call. But dude, I'd strongly advise against it. I considered this a moment, then replied, Joe's like a brother. I trust him with my life. I hope you're right, said John, because it's your life we're talking about. I was telling Special Agent Carr the ironclad truth when I said there was no one on the planet I trusted more than old Joe. That man always stuck with me through thick and thin. He was my best friend. Years before, when the IRS seized Joe's home for unpaid taxes, I'd pull him off the floor and invited him to live with me in Hemet. Darlene and I were still together at the time, and Joe took a spare room in back, sharing space with Ollie, the family dog. It was a long, hard fall from business executive to rooming with a Labrador Retriever, and old Joe's self-worth was officially shot to pieces. In a desk drawer, I came across a stack of letters he'd written to his boys, but hadn't been able to bring himself to mail. In my opinion, what that wrecked soul needed was a new focus and direction, just like me. At the time, I was the Hobo Kelly of landscapers, crossing the valley in a rusted pickup with a ladder strapped to the bed and an old wood chipper hitched to the back. My business was gradually being rebuilt. No small feat, given the hitman reputation. No small feat, given the hit my reputation took after I went to jail, and I figured it might be a good time to take on a full-time employee. And since Joe looked nothing like a midget, I hired him to drag, stack, and brush for room, board, and $50 a week. The man hated the work. This isn't for me, George, he griped whenever I was within earshot. But that shitty job gave Joe a reason to haul his depressed carcass out of bed each morning, and that was a start. With old Joe at my side, business took off. We began adding new clients and making money. I bought a new pickup and replaced the wood chipper, leased a bucket truck, and hired more full-time employees, none of them midgets. Of course, Joe wasn't always Employee of the Month material. I showed up at a job site one day and found him drunk on his feet, trying to move leaves with the wrong end of a rake. Even so, I liked and trusted the guy, and despite the drinking, or maybe because of it, we bonded as brothers, just a couple of screwed up kindred spirits. I banged on the door of old Joe's trailer. When he opened it, I hoisted a half pint of vodka I bought on the way to work from Van Nuys. Can I come in? Got something important to talk about. I followed Joe into the trailer, and he tucked himself behind the small dining table. I sat the bottle on top, then grabbed 2 plastic cups from beside a stainless steel sink. These clean as you're gonna get, said Joe. I set the cups on the table and poured them half full of vodka. You know how pissed off I am about them Vogels, I remarked as I finished pouring. No, not really, said Joe. Lately, I don't know what to think. I'm gonna explain that, partner. I just want you to know I've decided to do something about those bastards. Joe lifted his glass. That right? Like what? Like work with the feds to take them down. Joe lowered his glass without drinking. I'm going undercover, buddy, I told him. Gonna work for the ATF. Joe's eyes remained fixed on the table. I could almost read the man's thoughts. My buddy was certainly no fan of the Vogels, but he absolutely despised the federal government that had taken his family home. This is a big fucking deal, I continued as I parked myself on the fold-out bed. You can't tell anyone, understand? Joe refused to look at me. Well, come on, man. What do you think? I finally asked. My friend lifted his head. What do I think? He raised his glass in mock tribute. Happy trails, motherfucker. Have a good life. He tilted the cup and drained the booze. I wasn't sure what response I expected from my friend, but in hindsight, I suppose happy trails, motherfucker, made the most sense. Joe was smarter than I was, smart enough to realize that sooner or later, he'd be putting his life in harm's way by sticking with his old pal George. Do you know what you'd be getting into? He asked. leaning forward with an intensity I'd never seen before. Do you even know what you're getting yourself into? Don't be stupid, George. You've got a good life, brother, a nice business. Why would you risk it? I understood the man's point. Yes, there was a lot to lose, but I had no intention of letting my life slip away. Despite John Carr's warning, I still held some deluded notion that it would be mission accomplished after 3 to 6 months undercover. I'd just slip out the back and nobody would ever know it was old George Rowe who took the Vogels down. Partner, with or without you, I'm gonna do this thing, I told him. You can go on your way if that's what you really want. No hard feelings. I just wanted you to know what's going on, that's all. I figured I owe you that much. Joe grabbed the bottle and poured himself another. He was done talking, so I left him in the trailer to think things through. Then I climbed into my truck. I had to get over to Johnny's restaurant, where Christy, my girlfriend at the time, was waiting. She was the daughter of a notorious motorcycle outlaw named Blind Buck, a man who was dealing drugs in Hemet, back when I was known as the U-Haul Bandit. Blind Buck was the P of the Mascaleros, one of the oldest biker clubs in town, a big bruiser over 6 feet tall and north of 300 pounds, who viewed life through thick Coke bottle lenses. A big bruiser over 6 feet tall and north of 300 pounds who viewed life through thick Coke bottle lenses. Christie's old man might have been half blind, but he was also a vicious, drug-dealing son of a bitch who would stick a knife in you if you so much as looked at him cross-eyed. People in town were scared of Buck, and I was warned more than once to watch my back because the big bastard was out to nail me for dealing drugs on his home turf. Funny thing was, for a dude with a tough boy reputation, that big Mascalero was just a big old mama's boy. Bucky's mama even paid his rent. If not for her, I don't think that outlaw would have a friend in the world. He hadn't done a lick of time in jail because everyone else had done it for him, earning Blind Buck a long list of enemies through the years. The man lived in a constant state of paranoia, seldom leaving his house because he felt certain someone out there in the big bad world was just itching to get even. I had no sympathy for the brutal bastard though. Buck ruined lives. It must have pissed him off to no end when I showed up years later to date his little girl. As I turned on the Highway 74 and pulled up to a stoplight, a horn honked from behind. I recognized the face in the rear view. It was Billy, a punk I'd known since he was in diapers. I used to sell methamphetamine to his parents before his dad transitioned into heroin and died when his heart quit. Now, Billy was following his old man's footsteps. I pulled over, hopped from the truck, and walked back to say hello. When I got to the car, I recognized the girl sitting in the passenger seat. She was the Hemet fire chief's daughter, a 20-year-old beauty on her way to an early grave. I'd seen her around from time to time. We had mutual friends, and I knew she was the mother of Billy's year-old baby girl. I also knew another poorly kept secret. The girl was a hardcore heroin addict. In fact, with the exception of a few timeouts for detox, she'd been slamming the shit since age 16, every single day for years straight. "How you doing, Jenna?" I asked her. "I'm okay, George," she said cheerlessly. But that pretty young thing didn't look okay, and she wasn't looking so pretty that day either. The sucked up cheeks told me Jenna was a heavy meth user. Scabs on her skin and the faded yellowish bruises told me something else. That girl was being abused. We soon parted company, and I was on my way to Lady Luck again. A few days later, Billy would be locked up behind bars at the Southwest Detention Center in Temecula, charged with assault and battery. I wouldn't bother mentioning any of this if for not the fact that the young lady who put him there, that beautiful young heroin addict, was about to impact my life in ways I could never imagine, and for years to come. That night at Johnny's restaurant, I was drinking with Christy when some long-haired dude with a shitty disposition began making noise at the same pool table where my friend David had made that fatal mistake months before. This gum-flapping 20-something was drinking hard and running his mouth harder, boasting loudly that no one should mess with him because his uncle was vice president of Green Nation's narco chapter. The Norco Vagos, based an hour's drive northwest in the territory known as Horsetown, USA, billed themselves as the clean and sober chapter, Members were expected to say no to drugs and alcohol at all times, which was a joke, because Quickie John, the P of that group, later got nailed with a pound of dope.